So I was grabbing some lunch today, and I went over to a lovely place. Actually, now that I'm talking about it, I don't remember the name of the place. It's that Caribbean place that's on it's on L Street in between 10th and 11th there,
Yeah, it's
next to
right by
Seas
that
Candy.
Starbucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'm
I
very
never
sorry
remember
if you're
the
listening
name.
to this. Yeah, I'm terrible. I feel terrible that I can't remember the name of this place, but it was very, very good. I had a delicious wrap. But it was an extra special lunch because not only did I get delightful food, but I also got a show that I wasn't expecting to get. Honestly, I had kind of I didn't realize that I was kind of nostalgic for dumbasses like throwing their own little circus things at the Capitol. But I was kind of, when I saw the first person who walked by with like an American flag cape, I was kind of like, yeah, this, I haven't seen this in a little
I
while.
missed this.
Like, yeah, this feels great. This feels right.
So I think I know what you're talking about. I was walking up 16th Street early this afternoon, and I looked in the alleyway over by Capitol, and there were a bunch of semi trucks in it with Gadsden flags hanging behind them. And lo and behold, the convoy, this freedom convoy that's been, circling the continent really, has come back to roost in the great capital of the great state of California. I miss this.
Mm-hmm.
I miss them.
They're going to be here in, I think, full force at so we're recording Monday night, but I think their main event is tomorrow, right? So as you're listening to this, their main event is happening at the Capitol. Yeah, quite a time. Can I ask you a quick question though? Because I haven't been really paying that much attention to like the whole convoy thing. They're mad about COVID stuff, right? Like, isn't that like the point?
From the shirts I saw.
But like, we don't like, we're like, as far as the government is concerned, COVID is over. So like, why? I guess I don't understand. Like,
they don't watch the news. They
like what? Like what?
Really.
What is the problem now? I really don't. I mean, I guess there's still some kind of like, is there? I don't know. I don't have kids, so I don't pay attention to this shit. But like, there's like, is there like some kind of like vax mandate in schools or something that they're wigged out about, or like, what is their thing? I don't understand why they're mad, because like you don't have to wear a mask anymore and nobody's yelling at anybody about vaccinations anymore. So I guess I don't understand why, especially with gas costing like $12 a gallon, why you would be doing this convoy anymore. I guess I just don't really get it.
It's why it's so depleted now. I don't know. I agree with the nostalgia. I remember a time when folks would go down and wear their little MAGA hats, and they'd come back to their cars and their tires were slashed on N Street. And,
it's unfortunate.
I felt very bad for them. So I took a lot of pictures just, in case the cops needed those pictures. And yeah, those times I do miss a little bit. So it was a little nice seeing them with the little flags, but I don't know. I guess I'm also thirsting for something new. Like, what's next? What is next with these anti-vaxxer folks?
You better fucking knock on wood when you say that, man, because something fucking bananas is coming down the pipe.
Maybe.
For sure. Okay, let me ask you this. So today's events brought up this other thing with me. I don't know if I actually have talked about this on the show or not, but have you guys both seen the music video for Kid Rock's new song, We the People?
Absolutely not.
No.
Okay, so for one, it rocks. Like, everybody, you need to stop this podcast right now. Pull up YouTube.
Wait, no, don't.
And search for We the People by Kid Rock. The chorus to the song is Let's Go Brandon. And I swear to God, you're gonna think I'm doing a bit. I'm not doing a bit when I tell you that it is a catchy chorus. I listened to it today because I was inspired by all the convoy people. So I listened to it on my way back to work. It was stuck in my head for like 2 hours. I mean, say what you want about the guy, and there's a lot to say. That "Let's Go Brandon" chorus, though, I gotta hand it to him, man. That's a catchy chorus, and he, based on today's events, I was like, dude, he is gonna make $1 trillion off of this song. Like, he wrote like the
100%.
theme song to this event, and this event is happening all over the place.
Oh, I'm dying to hear this. I hope that there's like a posthumous solo by Josie, like a little like like a little 3D graphic of him or something.
I don't think that did happen, although I did see a thing where he just recently played a show in Nashville, and before he played the show, Trump had recorded a video where he came out and was like, Kid Rock is the greatest musician of all time, and you're all great patriots for being at this concert, and I'm here to tell you to make America rock again. And then like a bunch of fireballs went off, and Kid Rock jumped out in like a big, mink fur coat and started dancing around.
It's too perfect.
It's pretty good, honestly. See, here's why I don't want you to like get too far ahead of yourself on like, oh, I wonder what crazy thing happens next. Because the crazy thing happens next is that Kid Rock might be the president. and if he runs, he might win, and he might run. So, just buckle up, guys.
I'm here for it. I mean, if it's it's got to be better than Brandon, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if they start doing like pyrotechnics at the White House events, like, I'm here for it.
You don't want to startle your Joe, though. I don't know about that. Speaking of if it will or will not be better than our dear friend Joe Biden, we've got a lot to discuss about that man today, and the party that he leads. Shall we get started?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And you have Skylar.
And this is Mario, the co-chair of Sacramento DSA.
Oh, we can introduce you, Margot. You can just say you got Margot. Margot Rinaldo, thank you so much for joining us today. Co-chair of DSA Sacramento. You are... I thought it would be really good to have you on as somebody in a leadership position in a sort of democratic socialist space that does work in electoral politics, because we will be discussing a lot of American electoral politics and sort of where younger folks land in that, and kind of how a lot of younger folks are disaffected by a Joe Biden wing of this party. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Shannon's not here. Flo's not here. Shannon and Flo have been all over the place, as have I, for family stuff, like going to Long Beach, to Pennsylvania, to Florida. I do think Flo actually has the Measure U meeting tonight as well. I believe they should be back next week, but life happens. We'll see. We will see you too soon. But in the interim, I'm so glad to have you, Margot, kind of sit in with us. I asked you to be on as kind of a guest co-host, because I don't know, like this is just sort of a topic that like I want a co-host on who can kind of just be like, hey, I am of a younger demographic. I am, with DSA. I do, engage in electoral politics, and here's where I stand with a party of Joe Biden, both on the national and state level. What I want to do today is discuss our dear friend, President Joe Biden. I want to talk about how things have gone in his first, how long has it been? Year and a half in office? And where people are landing on this. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, can you begin by, do you have the stats pulled up on those recent polls that just came out? Because I think that is a great place to jump off here.
Yeah. So last week, and like these are the first real comprehensive polls this deep into his incumbency as president that we've seen on his approval rating. Last week, two major polls came out. One by, and I never pronounced them correctly, Quinnipiac poll came out in Wednesday of last week.
I think Quinnipiac is right.
Yeah, there you go. Right. And they found, how would you pronounce that?
I think it's Quinnipiac, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know. I learned by reading. They found that just 1 in 5 people under 30, actually 21%, but 1 in 5 people under 30 approve of the president. Again, this is a man who turns 80 this November. Well, 58% of people that age group disapprove of the job he's doing as president. That's a negative 37% approval sort of discrepancy for this age group. It really is sort of the younger folks within Gen Z and younger millennials and Gen Z. And then this is, the Quinnipiac poll, as Skylar would call it. That's a thing that
I hope I'm right now. I want to
honestly
sound like a real
that,
jerk.
Dude, that sounds better. I'm just going to say that anyway. The Quinnipiac poll, Quinnipiac does tend to like it has leaned in certain ways that the Biden administration has actually done full-on attacks on them, claiming that it's a far-right thing, blah, 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 blah. But the day following the Quinnipiac poll, Gallup, which is the tried and true poll in American politics for 100 years or so, came out with their own approval rating poll that found that millennials and Gen Z, their support for him has tanked 20 points in each age group, 21 points in Gen Z, 19 points in the millennials, to just about 40% approval rating. So young folks, by and large, their approval rating, this is the most really progressive demographic that you have. Their support for this Democratic president has plummeted 20%. Not only that, they found that the numbers are even worse for young folks who are also Black and Latino or Latino, and for those who are registered as independent voters. What are our initial reflections here? Well, let me first say that the geniuses at Vox cannot crack this nut.
Can you read that tweet, please?
I don't know if you saw, but our dear friend of the show, Zach Beauchamp, tweeted with apparently no sense of irony, Monday morning, tweeted, "Biden's collapse with young voters is kind of mysterious. I've heard a lot of theories, but I'm not sure any one of them is all that convincing."
It is quite mysterious. So real quick, Margot, are you Gen Z or are you a millennial?
I'm 1997, so I think I'm the first year of Gen Z. I should be the first, or yeah.
Cool deal.
Yeah, I recently turned 25, so I'm not considered a young person anymore, but having spent the last 25 years of my life being a young person, I definitely feel why people are demoralized by the Biden administration right now. So
can you crack this nut for our friend Mr. Beauchamp?
Help us unravel this mystery.
Well, okay, so the way I look at it is I've spent the last 5 years during the Trump administration in college. So my first year of college was my second year of college was the first year of the Trump administration. And so during that time, especially going through college at that time, you really consider like you're really considering all the things that he's doing wrong, and you're being told, yeah, he's putting kids in detention centers, he's he's cutting funding towards public education, he's attacking like the public school system, and he's giving more tax breaks to billionaires. And so during that time, I would say you really gain a consciousness about all the things that are absolutely going wrong with that administration. And you're hearing that also from the Democratic Party. And I think what's really demoralizing is that we had a candidate who ran on addressing a lot of the things that Donald Trump was not addressing. And he's been in office for a year and a half now, and he's backslided on like quite a few of those promises. So it's really upsetting, but I think it sort of has to do with the consciousness that was gained a lot during the Trump administration, which is that we are not going to stand for these things. And in a sense, you did feel a little bit more united to the more centrist parts of the Democratic Party, and now you're seeing you're kind of seeing the truth of it, and they don't really care about you. They are more interested in retaining sort of the power that they have held within Congress for the last however many years. So
what do you think specifically were some of the topics that younger folks were actually hopeful for at the start of a Biden administration, that it's the sort of bottom fell out there? Because like there's a lot of things that I think all of us were hopeful for, but like I didn't think, like for instance, I never thought that like Biden would be fighting to abolish ICE or something, but I did think that there were some possibilities that he would actually change material conditions for particular folks who needed real help. What kind of specific things do you think kind of changed course to lead 20% of folks 35 and younger to turn against him in the last year and a half?
I would say there's quite a few things. One of them is the backsliding on considerations of like canceling any sort of student debt. I think there was also like hope because his wife was a community college professor that he would be addressing public education in some form, shape or form. But I think what's really interesting is when you look at these statistics and you see that young folks, Black and Hispanic, have more than double their white peers heighten their disapproval of him.
Right. And just to echo for the listeners and viewers, the young white support for Biden dropped 10% since he started office. It was already a little low because white folks are more likely to be Republicans. But a lot of young progressive white folks just have like lost their support for him. But in young Black and Latino spaces, as you were saying, that has dropped 20%, which should be a cause for alarm for him. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, certainly. And I think what I think especially about that is with the increasing escalation of sort of like the militarization of countries in Eastern Europe and our support of that militarization process, like, I'm sorry, like being Latina myself and my family being from Chile, I know that like US intervention in other countries like frequently doesn't resolve the conflicts that are there and has the tendency to make a lot of those things worse. And so I wonder when I see that a lot of like young Hispanic and Latino folks are not supporting Biden as much, I think there's, at least for me, there's an acknowledgement of like, my family went through these traumas. They have not been addressed by the United States. They've never been addressed by the United States. And you're continuing to tell us that these are the solutions you want to pursue in other countries, these in order to increase democracy. And so
did your family flee Chile under Pinochet?
So my mom lived there her entire life under Pinochet, and she lived in Santiago, which is the capital, and she lived very close to sort of like the detention center where they captured like political prisoners. And so I would say like her family is quite traumatized from the experience that they had living there at that time. And I would say the worst part of it is sort of like the political repression that happens, and the fear that is really instilled in people who would otherwise be heavily involved in civic life is completely squashed by these foreign interests that don't want to see these countries achieve real democracy in any sort of meaningful way. Anyway, all that to say that to me, when I see Democratic Party line centrist folks continuing with like the actions of their predecessors, when we know that like our families have been, you know, damaged by a lot of those policies, it seems like when they speak to like issues of Latinos, when they speak to issues of Hispanic people, that it is all lip service. And so I think for me, I think about how these administrations do not want to adopt like an internationalist perspective to like health or any sort of meaningful like changes in the world. And so that's quite demoralizing to see that the war hawks are beating their drums again, and that we are supposed to just fall in line and sort of accept the fact that we're going to be participating in these wars again.
Yeah. So for listeners and viewers who don't know, the U.S. backed a coup in 1973, I believe, in Chile against a democratically elected Marxist who was widely supported by the Chilean people. And General Pinochet came in and just really created a lot of, killed scores and scores of people, hundreds of people at least. This is something that has happened all over Latin America. So you're saying, you're discussing, you're kind of saying like watching us sort of beat the war drums in Eastern Europe, like that's sort of like, given all of the horrible things that the U.S. has historically done in Latin America, that has younger folks with sort of a background and an understanding of the U.S. intervention in places like that is affecting sort of their position on Biden?
Yeah, well, sort of, and that I think especially for the increasingly like Latino population in California, who you know, like lots of our families are first generation. Like I'm second generation, but the people that we have like close relationships to that have been traumatized by the sort of those policies in their countries, I don't find it at all comforting that we think our involvement is going to like further peace in those regions, because I have yet to really see that. Or yeah. So that's definitely not the only reason people are not supportive of Biden. There's probably quite a few other reasons, but that's definitely one that comes to mind, that when I hear Democratic Party members speaking to Latino issues, it tends to be very like tokenized and just for votes.
Yeah. And, I don't think I can speak to why the young black population would have such a drastic drop as well. But I do know that during the elections, during the primaries, it was the older Black Democratic population that was much more for Biden than the younger folks. And I think possibly some of that could tie into sort of the police reform / police abolition movement, and the fact that Biden has said in no uncertain terms that he not only doesn't want to defund the police, he wants to fund them even more. And, you know, I'm sure there's other issues there as well. I mean, what else are some things that would affect young folks? You know, and Skylar, feel free to hop in. I think that, like, I think it comes down to kind of classic dialectical materialism, which is like, how are people's very basic needs just not being met? And it does fall along generational lines.
Right. If I may, like, to me, the problems the Democrats have with young people, and why I would guess that the problem will become exacerbated and will just get worse as we move forward, is that the Democrats are in place. The corporate Democrats, like Joe Biden Democrats, are in place to maintain the status quo. Like, that's sort of what they do, and that's why they're happy to pay lip service to healthcare reform or police reform or any number of topics that they talk about when they're on the campaign trail. When they get into office, they don't actually follow through on any of these things, and that's not a failure. That's intentional, because the system works the way that it should. Like, the country was founded on exploitation. The country was founded on exploiting, like, poor people and working people. That is the foundation of this country. That is the goal that is sought by Republicans. That is the goal that is sought by Democrats. And things like tying your healthcare to your employer, or making sure that people are entering the workforce saddled with like 6 figures of student debt, all of those things are in service of making sure that we have a subservient working class who just are innately have these boots on their necks that keep them down and keep them as part of a workforce that is exploitative, because no one has any kind of a way out of it under the current circumstances that we're in. That is a system like that. Like, Joe Biden works for that system. And so it's not that it makes me crazy when people are like, oh, he like wants to do healthcare, but like Joe Manchin won't let him. And it's like, no, he doesn't. He doesn't want to do that. Like, having people tied to their employers for their healthcare is part of the grift. That's like in there by design. It's not an accident. Like, the world is full of other countries who are doing it correctly and have like societies that are like much more free to come and go, and like can have medical emergencies without it being like financially ruinous for them, right? Like, it's not like we don't know how to do that. Like, the playbook is right there. It's not a mistake. Like, we intentionally do that in this country, and Joe Biden is an agent of that. It's not like that. I think that's why, like, I kind of don't really get into like the reform part. Like, it's not, to me, it's not like, oh, we got to get the right people in and we can like turn this boat around with the Democrats. The Democratic Party does not want to be fixed. It doesn't view itself as broken. The part where that gets them into fucking trouble is that they in order for this to happen, they need people to at least be comfortable enough to be like, oh yeah, like the status quo, it's not great, but like it's better than what the Republicans are doing, so I'll go ahead and I'll just vote for the guy with the D next to his name. Well, the part that they're fucking up is that things are getting so bad so fast that people aren't comfortable enough to like be able to continue to vote in that way. Just since COVID, like, people went, like, the richest people in the world went from being worth like $20 trillion or whatever, $20 billion to $200 billion, like, minimum wage has not moved in who knows how long. Like, what has happened to house prices just where we live here in Sacramento in the last 5 years versus like what has happened with wages? What is happening with inflation? Things are so bad and are on track to get so much worse that there is no argument to be made anymore for like, we should maintain the status quo. Like, there used to be a small sort of like, okay, like, it's not great, but it's, it's the best that we're working with. that argument gets harder and harder and harder and harder to make for people who are now in conditions where they work 80 hours a week and still can't afford to rent an apartment by themselves. You know, and that's and those, the Democrats fancy themselves ideally as champions of, you know, the poor and working class, like, hey, like the Republicans are the rich guy candidates, you know, we've got your backs, you know, and it's it becomes more and more clear that that's not true. And they fucked up by letting things get so bad that even people who aren't like big political, you know, people who don't spend their time, you know, on Twitter watching, you know, news on TV or whatever, are being like, wait a minute, what is going on? Why am I having such a hard time with just basic life stuff? Like, why? Right. Nobody else in the world has it like this. Like, I work hard. My friends, you know, my friends and my family, we all work hard and we get absolutely fucking dick in return from our government, right? So I think that to me is like the clearest version of why the Democrat, well, because like, you know, just even, okay, so just like young people, right? Like you're watching, like clearly Joe Biden is not taking climate change seriously, and why should he? Like, he's gonna be fucking dead before like anything gets really bad climate wise, right? He knows it. Why does he care? But like all like, what is it like? I mean, how many members of like Congress and how many people in Washington D.C. will even be alive in 30 years from now? Like, is it like 10%? Yeah.
That's 20%? The problem with our gerontocracy issue, right? Where right. so many of our leadership are 80 or older.
But you're like an 80-year-old man. There's like, the room is on fire. You're an 80-year-old man hoarding the fire extinguishers and then being like, why won't people vote for me?
Yeah. I'm keeping this corner of the room not on fire, at least. Like, come on.
Right, exactly. Like, the fire is spreading to that corner of the room very slowly, at least. So
Margot, what were you gonna say?
No, I wanted to speak to your point of we have always been this way, and that was one thing from teaching political science. I taught a 1-unit class of political science at Sac State, and it was pretty much teaching early U.S. history. And the one thing you realize is that our political system has always been set up to prioritize the interests of people with capital and property and white people. It has always been set up that way.
That's the foundation.
So, absolutely. And so when we have a Democratic Party that talks about liberal democracy and they don't even understand the foundations of that, it's like the water they're swimming in. They don't realize that it is actually an ideology. It's a method. It's also a method of analysis in political theory. You can analyze things for like how they embody sort of liberal values or what they actually accomplish in terms of those liberal values. And like often what you see is that there are so many flaws within that theory. There are so many flaws within the assumptions of liberalism. And so if we're not willing to ever really question what those are because we're told this is nature, this is it, you're never going to get a deeper analysis, and you're going to continue having the same issues where people with capital are always the ones making decisions. White people are always the ones making decisions because you're never fundamentally questioning the deeper structure that goes back to our founding. Yeah. And I think older folks tend to have this really like fantastical, idealistic version of the Democratic Party still of the 1960s, which you can even dispute the effectiveness of the party at that time as well. But I tend to see older folks, and I speak like from the perspective of my dad, who was like a hippie, that tends to be the end of their analysis of the Democratic Party. And why is that? I'm not sure. Maybe realizing like how deep the issues go is quite frightening for people.
Yeah, you know, we always want to make this asterisk on our show that there are plenty of boomer generation folks out there who are doing the Allison B916. If you're not following her on Twitter,
the
follow
only
her.
boomer who listens to this show.
No, plus our parents, Skylar.
I think my parents stopped listening.
But Allison has that analysis, right? And this sort of Marxist analysis that just like doesn't much exist within that generation often, right? Like when I told my mom and my stepdad a few weeks ago that the literacy rate in Cuba is 100%, their jaws dropped. Like they had no idea. Like, and so we're kind of like fed certain things through our, neoliberal media that like, it's just really hard for particular generations who can't break the circadian rhythm of watching their daily, nightly news shows, reading their particular paper, watching The View, whatever it is they do. Like that is where they get their information. That's how they digest it. And I think a lot of young folks are finding new ways to get their information. Not just that, but to your point, like to look through a different lens, to have a different analysis of the material conditions of our world and say, hey, something's not right here.
I think more than like the way that they intake information is different. Like their like quality of life and their life experience is wildly different.
Huge part of this.
For like boomers, it's like, well, things should be better. And for like kids now, kids who like people who are becoming adults today, it's like, how am I going to eat?
Things
like I will never be able to buy a house.
Right.
Like if my girlfriend gets pregnant, like neither of us can afford to have a kid because we both work like 100 hours a week. It's just so wildly different. It's like for boomers, it's theoretical. It's like, oh, well, like X, Y, and Z could be better. And like people now are in emergency mode. It's like, it's a completely different deal. So it's not even like, I think that's why boomers are more content to kind of sit back and be like, well, I wonder what Bill Maher's analysis is of this, because it's like academic for them, but it is not academic for people who are coming of age in America in 2022. And I think that's a major difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and something that really impacted me growing up was in 2008, like my family went through the housing crisis like quite badly, and we lost our house. And that was when I was 11. And I feel like I see younger people getting politicized earlier and earlier. And I think this also has to do with like the media we're consuming on like Instagram or Twitter or what have you. But I don't see any politicians besides AOC and Bernie Sanders like talking about like what damage this has done to young people and to families, and just that was something that was highly like politicizing in my life, like realizing that you can lose your house, like you can have housing insecurity for years after that. Like it's the effects of poverty are so long lasting. And I think that older generation, I don't know why, but it seems like older generations seem to have like this short-term view of the effects of poverty, when actually their generation, we know they're generational, and we know that they're not so easily mitigated,
It's over and over. It's like the material conditions, folks older than boomers, they've got their nut, they're fine. They're retiring quietly. Boomers, like I think they dropped like 5% in their support for Biden, where that probably lands pretty closely with whose lives got a little bit worse the last year and a half and whose we're just maintaining. Most of them, are kind of maintaining a stability. And then Gen X and younger, it's like there's not much for folks to look forward to in this country. And this is without even bringing into the conversation the real anti-racist conversations we need to be having too, that your Gen Y and Gen Z that are much, much more diverse than earlier generations were it is, right? I mean, like Gen Z, it's like there are certain age groups where it's like fewer than half the folks in that generation are white. So it's like it's almost this seismic shift showing in his numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, this is funny about boomers is that boomers are concerned about this in like a certain angle where they're like they're concerned about the effects, like sort of the natural consequences of having people who are all super poor and all super desperate. Is that like I was at the gym the other day and one of the TVs was showing Fox News, and I never watch Fox News, but I was watching the little thing, the chyron across the bottom to see like, what are these guys talking about? Their whole thing is like a Nordstrom got robbed in San Francisco, was a smash and grab. And it's like, like it's like people are starving in the street. Like, how do you think this is going to go, you fucking dumbasses? Like, you fucking take everybody's like nobody has any opportunities. And then you're like, I don't know. It's very funny to me to have people like decrying, like, because it's all, the boomers are the most worried about like, oh, like, homelessness is out of control and crime is out of control and blah, blah, blah. It's like, what is the primary driver for homelessness, crime, and everything else that your dumb old fucking crusty ass is sitting here worried about is poverty. And like everything, like all of the all your entire life is based around creating this problem that you are now like mad that exists. Like
liberalism lacks a historical analysis. Like, you find that like methods of analysis of like socialists or democratic socialists, we start at a point of historical analysis. That's your starting point for figuring out what the political conditions are. And if you're not doing that first, your analysis is based on idealism. You're basing your analysis on what things should be like and not what they're actually like. And there are even great liberal theorists who even critique liberals for having this lack of historicism in their political analyses. And that's really apparent to me. And I think the actual successes of critical race theory in schools have been that we do emphasize historical analysis in sort of civic life, in sort of social studies now. And so I would consider that like an element of progress. I see younger people taking sort of that method of analysis more, as well as like caring a lot more about their own psychology. I think that's like a step up. So. Oh
yeah. Oh my God, that's such a good point. Are we missing anything here? Because I kind of want to bring this, I want to bring this to sort of let's bring it back to California here, right? Biden's numbers aside, we are still affected sort of by this phenomenon here in California, where the Democratic Party really runs the show, right? Nearly half the registered voters in our state are registered as Democrats. Republicans are hovering just under 24% of registered voters. And then no party preference voters are just below that. I think third party voters are just, they're moving up to like 6.5% of voters lately. So like, this is a state run full bore by Democrats. So it's like, they don't even get the excuses that Democrats in Washington have. Like, well, why aren't my material conditions getting better? Why can't I have health care? Why can't workers get through the day, afford the simple things like, paying a reasonable rent and getting my orange juice and like getting to and from work easily and then still having time for my family? It's all Democrats here, baby. There's nothing they can hide behind anymore. And I guess like my first thing is we look at the sort of gerontocracy of DC, and we have here in California, this state of 40 million people. We are represented by Dianne Feinstein, who's 88 years old, senator. Obviously, she's like made a whole lot of headway in her career. And she led the people of San Francisco through like the horrible killing of Harvey Milk and who was it? The mayor, Moscone. I don't know how to pronounce his name. But she is at this point in her career where it's obvious that her mental acuity is not there and that she probably cannot perform the duties of office. Can I just read a couple excerpts from this article from the San Francisco Chronicle? Keep in mind, these were interviews that were done before her husband died back in early March. So this was last winter that they conducted these interviews. I believe they waited until the last couple days to release this article, sort of out of respect for, you know, the mourning process. But I think we all know that there have been questions about Di-Fi's ability to do her job dating back to 2020, right? But let's just like start this article off a little bit. This is by Tal Kopan and Joe Garofoli of the San Francisco Chronicle. When a California Democrat in Congress recently engaged in an extended conversation with Senator Dianne Feinstein, they prepared for a rigorous policy discussion like those they'd had with her many times over in the last 15 years. Instead, the lawmaker said, they had to reintroduce themselves to Feinstein multiple times during an interaction that lasted several hours. Rather than delve into policy, Feinstein, 88, repeated the same small talk questions like asking the lawmaker what mattered to voters in their district. The member of Congress said, with no apparent recognition, the two had already had a similar conversation. Now, this is not just this one lawmaker from California, who I believe is in the House of Representatives. 4 U.S. senators gave anonymous interviews to these reporters, 3 of them Democrats, as well as 3 former Feinstein staffers. And it's kind of an open secret now in DC that, you know, this 88-year-old Californian is no longer fit to represent the people of California in DC. Kind of, what does this say about the state of things? I guess that's my first question.
I mean, I think it really speaks to like this really deeply entrenched seniority structure that's really present within the Democratic Party and the California Democratic Party specifically. And that's what it shows me, honestly. I'm hard pressed to think that she's still in that position because she has such a great connection with voters in her district.
You come from sort of, you worked at the state capitol for a while. You've kind of seen how the power structure works. Can you speak to that a little bit within the answer you just gave?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and as background, like I've been working for Democratic candidates since I was 15. So I worked for the mayor of San Jose on his campaign. He won by 1% when I was in high school. And so like, I think I've engaged at different levels of both local and like state politics in these elected officials' offices. I worked in the Caltrans legislative office for about a year, but I worked in the director's office there for about 2 years. And just, I think the one thing that really became apparent to me is that the bills that tend to get passed or that tend to get presented have a lot to do with sort of these like safe constituencies these legislators have created for themselves. And so they tend, obviously, they tend to be folks who have enough time, enough money to participate in that level of politics and have the attention of those folks. And so I think what was really demoralizing to me working in a lot of those spaces, but especially in the state legislature on the Select Committee for Police Reform, was that literally regardless of the academic advice, of the community advice, of the legal advice that we were getting as to how to reform the criminal justice system in California, nothing was done. Like nothing came of all of those meetings that we participated in. And to me, what that really spoke to is that, despite the goodwill of all the young people who might work at the Capitol, despite their possible want for a more progressive future here, it's not really going to happen if Gavin Newsom and Rusty Hicks are not willing to, stop taking money, honestly, from corporate and private interests like the police unions.
For folks who don't know, Gavin Newsom is the governor of California. Rusty Hicks is the chair of the state Democratic Party, and they continue to take money from interests like those you're talking about right now. I think the seniority structure is really interesting to me because from what I read in this article about Feinstein, and it's obvious she's not fit to serve. I don't know how anyone reads through that and can say anything else. There's been high turnover in her office. Multiple people from different parties are saying this is bad. This doesn't feel good. And this is coming I don't think the Senate should exist. I think it's very undemocratic, but even worse is having a senator who literally doesn't know who they're talking to 20 minutes after they start talking to them. That's a problem. Mm-hmm. But this power structure conversation, I think, is really important because in her position, no one can or will say no to her. Mm-hmm. There's this really awkward interaction that happened between her and the head of the Democrats in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, in 2020, where he had to tell her in repeated conversations that she needed to step down from head of a committee. What committee was this in the article?
I don't remember.
It was the Judiciary Committee. She had to give up her leadership post because, it was because she was struggling with memory loss. That's my read on that. But he had to have that conversation with her multiple times to let her know, because she kept forgetting they had this conversation. So this is one of those things where that finally happened because he was above her and sorry, this has to happen. But there are very few people above her. And so now you're having this person who's unfit to serve the role, and you have to get her okay to step down from the role for her to step down from the role. And so it's just never going to fucking happen, right? So then what?
Didn't she get herself in trouble for didn't she I wasn't paying super close attention. Didn't she say something about when they were doing the Amy or the God damn it, now I'm forgetting the name of the yeah. When they were doing her hearing and Dianne Feinstein had some kind of statement about this was really, really well done. Thank you to Republicans for doing such a great job. And all the Democrats got real mad at her for it.
Yeah. Didn't she hug someone like Lindsey Graham or something?
I think she hugged Lindsey Graham. Yeah.
And she praised them for having conducted a great process. It might not have been Graham. It was one of those ghouls with the Republican Party. But yeah, so even here in California, my limited experience, but I do know folks at the Capitol. I do talk to them about this, and they do very much work in a hierarchical mindset. They still suffer from this here locally, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking at this from the perspective as a young person who really enjoys working in civic life and hopes to you hope to be able to do something you love and help people. I look at a lot of the young folks who end up working for the party, that is what they're looking for, right? But where it gets sort of perverse is when you're constantly asked to not bring up any disagreement. You're there for labor, you are there for labor, and so the frustrating thing to me about working in those offices was that you were never like sort of appreciated for your input. You were never asked to be there to have to contribute in that way. You were asked to be there to pretty much do the busy work that the members don't want to do. And the way that you promote yourself is if you're willing to go along with that, and you're willing to not ruffle too many feathers. And so that, and seeing so many young people get sucked into that sort of mindset is frustrating, because I feel like you have a population of folks who are desperate for fulfilling jobs, and this is where they think they're going to find that. And they're actually getting taken advantage of in quite a lot of ways. As an intern, I was not paid. And I was expected to work 20 to 40 hours a week. Anytime the assembly member needed something from you, you were expected to just be there. And so you sort of have this captive population. And I think especially for young people, and I can speak to those who come from Sac State, because Sac State has such like a strong pipeline to the Democratic Party and to Capitol work, is that, and granted, Sac State is a majority minority school, and so I think, and as well as a highly working class like student school, you're given this opportunity to like have a fulfilling job, but like I don't know, it ends up sort of just being sort of like some way of surviving, like survival. I kind of forgot where I was going with that, to be honest. But
you're just discussing kind of structurally. It's like, you know, there's almost like a take what you can get. And fuck, I mean, like that. Yeah, I guess you're also kind of hinting at the need for unionizing within the state capitol.
Yeah, and I think one of the most heartening things was to see that Instagram account go up. Which was created, I think, by interns, or at least like young staffers, who are openly discussing like all the issues they had with these legislators at the Capitol. And I was like, hell yeah, man! Like this is exactly what you need to be doing, because as young people, we're never going to realize our collective power if we keep giving it away to people who do not give a shit about helping us.
Yeah. You know, we are in a time where another poll that was like apolitical found that 75% of young people support unions, support unionizing Amazon. That is a seismic shift. This is historic.
Again, that's because Amazon fucked up and let things get too bad for their employees. If you keep people at a certain level of like this, there's a sweet spot where people are comfortable enough, but still you're barely giving them anything, where you can get people to not be into that. But if you let them fall below that threshold, everybody's going to get behind the union.
Don't tell the capitalists. You're giving it away. Don't tell the capitalists this. Got
to bring us back up, man. It's the beer and Netflix theory.
You look at historically any revolution that happened, and it's like the numbers of what percent within that country had what. It is startlingly similar to what we're seeing in the US today. This is now the moment where workers are organizing at levels we haven't seen since the apex of the Communist Party of the United States of America, right? So like we are finally seeing workers move in a way that should mobilize our politicians, our Joe Biden, the same way that it mobilized a Roosevelt to say, hey, if we don't make some concessions, we're going full bore socialist in this country. They're too old. They don't know. They don't remember this shit. And they're going to have to. It's not that they're too old.
It's that he's not afraid of it. The thing, this is also why guys like Joe Biden are like, fund the police, right? Because he knows that, and all these guys know that at the end of the day, when things get really, really, really bad and it turns into dog eat dog around here, the only thing in between all of the workers that they let down and themselves are the police.
That's 100% true. But I do think they don't understand what's facing them. I do think they don't see the wave that's hitting them. But I do think that they have like a rising fear, and to that point, like they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna fund the cops as much as we can because I'm getting scared. Go, Margot. Sorry.
No, yeah. When I was working on the Select Committee for Police Reform, the actual last conversation I had with my boss that I think got me like fired from, well, I wasn't fired, I was like secretly let go of my job or my internship, was because I asked them, I was like, how long do you think you're going to keep winning if you keep working with the sheriff? And after that conversation, my direct boss never messaged me again. I had filled out the paperwork to get an assembly email and I never got it. And I was simply just like not replied to by my office.
Incredible.
And it's like, we don't want you here if you're going to make this hard for us. Like, we don't want you here if you're going to make us like have to own up to the shit that we're actually doing. Like, it's more expedient to get rid of you. And that's demoralizing. I can imagine if we have younger people who are developing sort of more critical consciousness online from reading their own things, that's not going to fly for very long. And yeah, it seems like they're totally blindsided by it.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of people going online to read things to, help them along with their critical thinking skills, is there like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of how to say this. Where is a place online that today's disaffected youth, upset and frustrated with the circumstances that they've been born into, where's somewhere online that they could go, not just to read interesting things and hear perfect takes, but to, involve themselves in a community of like-minded individuals who share their values and hope to see similar outcomes to the ones wished for by these people?
That's a great question, Skylar. And Margot, if you don't mind,
nailed the landing.
And it just really landed that well.
Yeah.
There is a place, and that place would be the QAnon signal channels. Wait, no. If you can't find your way onto those, I would recommend checking out voicesrivercity.com. We do weekly episodes on the news of the day, both locally, state, and nationally. We do the Follows the Money project, and my dear friend Tibby has been bothering me to keep doing that this year, so I will be working on those spreadsheets this week. If you support our work with the podcasts and the work that we're doing with the Follows the Money spreadsheets, please do become a patron. It's $5 a month, as little as that. It can be as much as $25 a month. If you do the higher side of it, you get a t-shirt, you get a fucking mug, you get to hang out with us maybe not whenever, we got things to do sometimes, but you get to hang out, it'll be fun.
You guys gotta stop calling me. I gotta get back to work at some point. I know I said I would hang out with you whenever.
Yeah, definitely don't call him on Tuesdays. Those are the worst days for him. But yeah, I mean, we care about what we do. We love what we do. And if you like what we do or love what we do, please help support what we do. I guess that's all of it. We have a store. I know our dear friend Mickey Rat bought a bunch of stuff on the store that I still have to deliver to him. You will get that this week, Mickey. voicesrivercity.com/shop. You get t-shirts, you get mugs, you get koozies, you get stickers, all the things. And then beyond that, I am on Twitter at Kempa, YUKNOWKEMPA.
You can find me at Guillotine for You. That's Guillotine, the number 4, YOU.
Shannon can be found at ShanND Stevens.
You can find Flo at Flojaune. That's FLOJAUNE.
Margot, how can we find you on the tweets? or elsewhere?
I'm not too active on Twitter. Honestly, it gives me a lot of anxiety, but I use my Instagram a lot, and you can find me at Margot Rinaldo, MargotRinaldo.
Thank you so much for being a guest host with us today, Margot. I love the Gen Z perspective. Folks like you and so many other young folks within DSA, within Sunrise, within the movement for Black Lives, you are the ones that really are picking up the torch, and that we have to follow. And I just have so much respect for the hard work already being done within your generation. So, thank you. And yeah, anything else we got to say?
No, I think that is about it.
Cool. Well, let's call it a night, and goodbye, everyone.